Hello, everyone. I am happy to see you here. This is the counseling series of videos talking about different subjects that you might need more information about for dealing with college. I have the pleasure of talking to you about financial aid, just a fun topic of paying for college. So let me start by introducing myself. My name is Daniel Johnson, and I'm one of the counselors at Chaminade. Here's one thing that I'm distinctly not. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a certified financial planner. Okay. I do have a lot of really great information about saving for college and paying for it through all of these different means, and I'm ready to share that with you. But remember, your situation might be different, and so contact the important people that you need to make sure that you understand every component of financial aid. I'll have a bunch of links in the description so that you can do some research for yourself. But I'm going to cover a lot of the basics right here in this video. The first thing that we want to do is cover what we're covering. The overview of this video is, what is financial aid? Where does it come from? We're going to talk about some important acronyms like cost of attendance, COA, expected family contribution, EFC, the FAFSA and the CSS profile, those are applications for financial aid, and then also some myths and misconceptions about financial aid. Let's get right into it. What is financial aid? Well, going to college is going to be very expensive. There's lots of different ways that you can pay for this. And we're going to be talking about all of the different places and different types of money that we can gather together to sort of pay for college. And this can be complicated because in many situations, you're going to get a whole financial aid like dossier from your college. It's going to have, what they want you to pay, what the college pays in, what this source pays in, this scholarship, and that money from the federal government. And with all of these things coming together, it can be confusing and overwhelming, and things can fall through the cracks. That's why understanding all the different components right now can help out a lot. So let's talk about the different types of aid. The first one is scholarships and grants. That's free money. You don't have to pay it back. Sometimes you have to pay it back if you don't follow through on some of the requirements. For example, there are grants for future teachers. They'll pay for your education, but then they'll ask you to teach in a public school for a certain amount of time. You'll have to pay back the grant money if you don't fulfill that requirement. But for the most part, that's free money. Number two, work study. You earn that money, and that's a really good way of getting some money during college, and we'll talk about that in detail later. And then finally, we have loans. This is borrowed money that you're expected to pay back, and in most cases, pay back with a significant interest rate. Now let's talk about the different places where this money can come from. Starting off, we have the federal government. The United States is giving out money to go to college. Then we go to the state government. California will give you money to go to college. And then even smaller, we have the colleges or the institutional aid. They give out a lot of money for you to attend their specific school. Then private sources. Almost every single company or nonprofit has some sort of scholarship or some avenue to give you money. And then finally it gets even smaller to just you. If you have money, you can pay for college. So knowing the different types of aid and the different places it can come from, let's talk about some background information, and then we'll sort of talk about these different modes of money. Okay, so the first thing that we need to talk about is the cost of attendance. The cost of attendance is how much it costs to go to your college. That, of course, includes tuition. Sometimes that's all we focus on, and that seems to be the big number, tuition, how much it costs. Okay, but there's much more associated with going to college. You have fees added on into tuition. You have room and board. You have to live when you're in school. You have books and supplies and transportation and all these little details. If your financial aid only covered tuition and you couldn't raise money to live or eat, you're not truly going to school. So cost of attendance is supposed to figure out a number that you could actually go to school, and everything is sort of taken care of. Now, this cost of attendance is calculated by each school. You might find that your cost of attendance is slightly different. Maybe the school budgeted a little bit more for room and board than you can spend living off campus. Maybe you're actually spending more money on, supplies or transportation. Maybe you get a bunch of books from like a really cheap source and, you actually will adjust your cost of attendance a little bit. Okay. None of what you do matters. Cost of attendance is determined by the school. It's like a set number. I'm going to go over a few costs of attendance so that you can see kind of the breakdown for different schools. This is the University of Southern California. I picked this because I talk about them a little bit later on, but also they have a truly staggeringly high tuition. If you look down here at the cost of attendance, by the way, this is from the College Board website, if you're wondering where I'm getting this information. And by the way, cost of attendance is also on each school's individual website as well, and on Navion's. This just lays it out a little bit clearer so I can talk about the different categories. So, by the way, in-state costs and out-of-state costs are the same because USC is a private school, and their tuition is a mere $59,072 a year. Their room and board is calculated at just under $1,600. Books and supplies at $1,200. Personal expenses over there at $1,500. Just under $600 for transportation. So they're looking at the cost of attendance at around $76,000. Now, just saying you have to pay $76,000 is every year is crazy. That's so much money. But hopefully you can take all of these different sources of money and start chipping away at that. Let's take a look at another school to give us some more perspective. This is a private school that's kind of expensive. Let's take a look at a public school. UC Berkeley. Our in-state tuition is $14,000. Still a lot of money, but just feels so much better than that other $60,000 number. Their room and board is calculated a little bit more expensive at $17,000, and then we have some books and supplies, estimated personal expenses, all the way up at $4,000. Okay, transportation expenses. So they've estimated the cost of attendance to be $37,000. By the way, for some catharsis, let's go ahead and click on out-of-state costs because that will actually be different. So other people trying to go to Berkeley will pay, instead of $14,000, $42,000. So you can see the cost of attendance for outside students jump up significantly. So we have access to our Cal States and UCs for really good rates. Unfortunately, if you want to go to a public school somewhere else, you're going to see this jump in price from in-state to out-of-state. Let's get cheaper. San Diego State University. We've gone from a UC public school to a Cal State, another public school. And the tuition has dropped even further to just under $8,000. And then finally, we can get even more affordable. This is Moore Park College, community college, and their tuition is $1,448. So something incredibly affordable. In fact, their estimated total cost of attendance, because there is no room and board on Moore Park College, is under $8,000. So that seems to be pretty reasonable when it comes to getting an education. That's one of the draws for community college. Now, this is what the schools say we need to pay to go to school. But we have to calculate what you specifically need to pay. And you don't calculate that. There's a system put together to calculate expected family contribution. That's the amount a family can reasonably pay to go to college. And you don't calculate that. The federal government calculates it by using the FAFSA. The FAFSA is this special formula. It's this application, and you ask for aid, and then they use it to figure out how much you're expected to contribute. FAFSA can be filed in October, and it basically stays the same regardless of what college you have. So, how do they calculate EFC? Well, they take your income, your assets, your household size, your number of students in college, and the age of the older parent. Okay, so they put all this stuff together. Most of it is gathered from your taxes, and they find out how much they think you should pay for your student to go to school. Examples of assets, by the way, are a 529 savings plan. It's still calculated, although it's calculated differently. So remember, even though you are doing something responsible like saving for college, it is still in the EFC, but they do special math to see how it fits into the EFC. Same things with educational IRA accounts, prepaid tuition plans, trusts, inheritance, stock, cash, mutual funds. All of these are examples of assets. So here's what they do. You have a college that you're going to go to, and they have the cost of attendance, whether it's $8,000 or $80,000. Then they've calculated your expected family contribution. They subtract what they expect you to pay, and then that's your financial need. Okay. There are a lot of schools that say, look, we will find a way for you to go to school. We will meet financial need. There's schools out there that guarantee 100% need met. That doesn't mean that you don't pay anything. It means that they make up the difference between what you're expected to pay and the cost of attendance. Some schools really brag about their numbers and say, we meet 80% of need or 90% of need. Okay, so there are financial aid offices designed to target that financial need and make sure that, everything works out so that you can attend school. This doesn't address the fact that you might disagree with the expected family contribution. You're like, wait, how much are they thinking that we should spend? That doesn't work for our family. Every family is different, and you can't really affect the expected family contribution as much as you would like. So you kind of have to work from it after these numbers are calculated. So there are several different places where all of this different kind of money can come from. I mentioned things like grants and scholarships, free money, or loans, money you have to pay back. And a lot of these different places, like the federal government, then the state government, then the college or institutional aid, private sources, they can all provide different pieces of this puzzle. And hopefully all of these different sources will come together with different types of money to make a financial aid package. And because money comes from so many different places in so many different forms, it can get confusing. So I'm going to break down the types of money that you can get coming from its source. And the first thing I want to talk about is the federal government. The federal government decides what kind of money to give you based on the FAFSA. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. And it's an application that you can send in, and it has a lot of important details on it that'll help them generate what your expected family contribution is and what the federal government can offer you. And the FAFSA does such a good job of gathering all this information and sort of putting it together that a lot of other people use it too. Like the state government uses the FAFSA document. Colleges will use the FAFSA too. So they're all using kind of the same document to come to different conclusions and apply it to their own different types of money or grants that they can give out. Okay. So the FAFSA is really important that you just create an ID, you follow their instructions. The ID could give you access to certain Department of Education websites. It's what you use to sign the FAFSA, and you can just put in all your information and follow the instructions. It's become really easy in recent years. And the FAFSA needs only a few things: your federal income tax returns. And one way that the FAFSA has gotten way better at this is they actually can use the IRS data retrieval tool, which means that if you give it permission, it can go into the IRS and pull the information from your taxes. That's either scary or cool, whatever you think. You need your social security number and then other records, like records of untaxed income, like child support, received paid workers' compensation, current bank statements, business and farm records, records of stocks, bonds, and investments, and an alien registration number if you're not a U.S. citizen. Once you have all of these pieces of information, you can put them into the FAFSA and send it off. Now, the FAFSA is not the only application out there for financial aid. There's the CSS profile, and that's a private application created by the College Board that private schools use. And some institutions will say, we'll take the FAFSA, but we also want the CSS profile. I'll talk about the details in the CSS profile a little bit later, but just know the FAFSA is the most important, and it's the only one that'll work for many places like the federal government. So, what kind of stuff can the federal government give you? Well, there's the federal Pell Grant, and that can award up to $6,000 a year. There are also federal supplemental education opportunity grants that can offer anywhere from $100 to $4,000 a year. These both offer off of financial need and have minimum academic requirements. So it's mainly finding out whether you need the money more so than if you academically earn the money or deserve the money that way. So part of this also could be federal loans. So those were grants, and you can get money from grants. And federal loans are money that you can borrow from the federal government for school. You can see that there's subsidized loans and unsubsidized loans. All of them have limits, and you can see that the limits right here they're not covering USC. We're talking about, $5,500 loan limits. And, the previous slide, we're talking about $6,000, which is plenty to cover community college. It's going to take a big chunk out of CSUs. But if you're talking about, state schools out of state, or, you're talking about private schools, these are really small numbers. And so people need to go beyond the federal government to get the rest of their money. But this is a good start, and you need to pursue these. The interest rates of these federal loans are usually really good. Undergraduate borrowers, 2.75%. That's a good interest rate. And even with parents at a 5.3% interest rate, that's okay. So pay attention to your own financial situation and whether these loans make sense. Even though 2.75 is a pretty good interest rate, if you have a bunch of money at that interest rate and you're expected to pay it back immediately, that can still be a big deal. There's a lot to be said about how much financial burden you want to put on students as they're going through college and just coming out of college. All right. There's other types of loans too, like the Federal Direct Loan Plus loan. This is a loan for parents. It can cover outstanding cost of attendance, and it has a fixed rate of 5.3%. So basically, if you take all of your other money coming together, okay, and you take the cost of attendance, and then you take your expected family contribution, and then you find out your financial need, this Federal Plus loan can fill in all of those gaps wherever you want. Obviously, it won't give you extra money to redo that back bedroom you wanted to do, but it'll help you cover everything else at a pretty good interest rate. Okay, one thing that I want to talk about, as I've been talking about loans, are the differences between loans from the federal government and loans from private sources, because sometimes we lump loans all together, but there are serious differences between them. So I want to talk a little bit about loans. And one thing that I need to mention is that this is a big money industry. Big banks want your business. And they want your students' business too. And you might be really comfortable with dealing with banks and loans, but sometimes students is their first opportunity getting into this world. And if I type in student loan into Google, I see 4 ads. None of them are for the FAFSA. Okay. Then I see a picture of a graduate and a ball and chain weighing them down. And then I see hopefully some uplifting news about student loan forgiveness. But all of these ads are for people trying to sell their loans, to have students sign up for their loans. And some of them are fine. I'm sure that there are great loans out there. But I clicked on one of them, and you have to consider what this could do. So you have the average student signing up for one of these gap loans, like they need some money from private sources, and they could sign up for, a fixed APR of anywhere from, looks like 4% to the highest of 14.5%. 14.5%. Just imagine if they're trying to finance, tens of thousands of dollars of education, and they're sitting at 14%. Not to mention, a lot of students don't know the difference between fixed APRs and variable APRs. And this is just, it's actually just a problem. It's a problem that hopefully people like me at Chaminade can kind of send out the warning signals to our seniors of watch out. Paying for college is a big deal, and you need to be responsible and pay attention to it. Another thing that's really great is that the financial aid centers at colleges, they're not involved in admissions. They're just there to help students pay for it, and they're there to help them, and they're amazing people. So they are a resource. And so what we want to do is say, hey, students, pay attention, but to send them right into the hands of financial aid specialists at their colleges, because there's opportunities for students to really cause some damage to their future by taking out huge loans at high percentage interest rates. Okay. Also, the federal student aid, the FAFSA, has a really cool guide that says the differences between federal and student loans and private loans. Again, the link will be in the description and it'll go through one step at a time how all of these are different, from deferment to refinancing or reconsolidation. Like those are going to be different, to loan forgiveness, all that stuff. And so it's a riveting read. Okay. The next thing, so we're back. So we're a little bit away from private loans now. We're actually back on the federal government, and this isn't a loan. This is federal work study, and I have to say, I am a huge fan of federal work study, and I'm actually just a huge fan of working in general in college. Here's why: students, especially students at Chaminade, are kind of over-scheduled a little bit. They seem to always have stuff going on. And actually, if you think about it, they're at school from like 8 to 3. 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 7 hours a day, probably 5 days a week, maybe a little bit less. So we're talking about like 30 to 35 hours a week. And that's not even a single activity. Students are regularly comfortable with spending 40, 50 hours on academics and on their stuff. They're about to go into a world where they spend 15, 16 hours per week in class. We're just taking the normal time commitment for class and just slashing it in half. And so many students go to class and they find they have tons of free time on their hands. There's not the same stuff to do that they had before. Maybe they watch more Netflix, they play more video games, maybe they get involved in clubs. But sometimes, athletics aren't the same, in college. So sometimes they need something more structured to do. Work is great. So federal work study is kind of a pool of where students can work. So basically the federal government gives the school some money and says, hey, we're going to give you some money to pay this group of students because they need it. And you can give them the rest of the money. So the school gives them a job and they use part of the federal government's funds to pay them. But they get a check. They actually get a check and they can use that money however they want. It doesn't already have to go to tuition. If you need it to go to tuition, please send it to tuition, but they literally get a paycheck. And one thing that's really great about work study is that it's on campus. That's so, so important, because your manager at Starbucks might be great, but they're not going to schedule you. They might not schedule you around all your classes. They might ask you to do some overtime. They might ask you to do a lot of stuff. You might have to commute off campus to get there. Federal work study and working on campus has very strict rules for what they can have their students do. They're usually really flexible, and they're usually really fair in terms of their wages. Another added benefit of working on campus is that you get to interact with other students. You get to be a part of the school community. I worked several jobs. I actually never got to do work study, but I still got jobs at school. So again, if you don't actually qualify for work study, that's still fine. Go and try to get a job and try to get one quickly in some place that you like. Places that usually people like having jobs on campus. Think about ways that you can interact with other students. So even though, working at Starbucks, I gave that as kind of a bad example for being off campus, working on the on-campus coffee shop could be good. I mean, you're baristaing it up and chatting with other people. You're meeting a lot of people. You're the friendly barista. That sounds fun. I worked in tech support. So I would have students would bring in their laptops and I would fix their laptops. And so I had the opportunity to talk to a bunch of students and make a lot of friends as some silly freshman my first year there, and that was great. Okay, things you might want to avoid is working in working in donations has usually been the really, really bad end of the spectrum, where students are like, oh my gosh, all I'm doing is calling up people that don't want to talk to me and reminding of their time in college and asking for money. But again, but still, it's a job, and it's a good job, and it's a good thing to have. Other students have talked about how they really liked working in the athletics department. They're like, wait a second, all I have to do is guard this door and I get to see every basketball game for free. And they get really excited about it. My wife worked as the secretary for the sociology department. So she never got to interact with any students because no one was coming into the sociology department, but she got to really connect with all of her professors, see them as people and give them their mail and chat and find out how their projects are going. And she found that really, really rewarding and made really strong connections with professors, more so than a lot of other people in college. So take a look at the jobs around you at college, and whether you qualify for work study or you're just getting a job on campus, I highly recommend it. You will have enough time for it. You'll get new exposure to what the world is really like. You'll get new exposure to your professors or to staff or to other students. And I think that it would be really great for a lot of you. Okay, that was too much on working, but that's an important part of like finding ways to finance not just books and transportation and tuition, but fun. Like having enough money for spending money to have fun is important. So having a job could make your life at college way better. Okay. So now we've talked about a lot of the state and federal government programs. Again, FAFSA website has everything on there. Now let's talk about state government. So California has another really good website, California Student Aid Commission, and they have their Cal Grants. They have all of the eligibility requirements. One thing that's important for you to know is that if you fill out the FAFSA, you will automatically be eligible because Chaminade will automatically submit your GPAs to California for Cal Grants. Cal Grants, there are a bunch of different grants. There's Cal Grant A and B and C, and they're kind of designed for different things. These are the numbers for A. You can get up to $5,700 for Cal State schools, $12,000-ish for UCs, and $9,000-ish for private schools. You need a minimum of 3.0 GPA, and you need to have financial need in order to qualify. So again, they're pulling their numbers and their information from the FAFSA and then making their decision based on that. Okay. There's another scholarship through California. It's called the Middle Class Scholarship. And there are a lot of requirements for this, but in general, it's this set fund. And if you qualify, and you might be more likely to financially qualify than some of these other scholarships, then you could get a certain amount of money. Unfortunately, it's not as laid out as a lot of these other scholarships and grants. Basically, MCS scholarships are not set amounts. They may vary by student and institution. The award amount is determined after you are awarded any federal or state or institutional need-based grants for which you are eligible. The final award amount will be based on the number of students eligible for MCS statewide and the funding allocated by the state budget. So it's just like this big up in the air thing where you're like, okay, so there's this money set aside for these middle-class scholarships. And then how much we get is kind of decided at the end after everyone tries to grab their piece. So please apply. Look up this information on the Student Aid Commission for California to see if you want it, but it's not one of these sort of guaranteed programs where I can tell you about limits and stuff like that. All right, let's talk about the largest contributor towards your financial aid package statistically, and that's the college or institutional aid. They usually do the most for students out of all of these different categories. And that's the college. The college wants you to come. They want you to be able to attend. And so they're going to have whole departments making sure that you can come to their school. So I'm going to mention the CSS profile again, because we talked about the FAFSA, which was the application for the federal government and many schools, but some schools will want the CSS profile as well. Basically, they want this in addition to the FAFSA. They charge you money for it. I know. Usually if anyone wants to like give you scholarships or give you financial aid or help you out, you like should never pay money because that's sometimes a scam. But they charge you $25 for the initial application and $16 for each additional college you request. There's a special place where you register. Important that you need to find out if your school needs this. If they need it, do it. If they don't need it, just forget about this whole section. Okay. CSS profile goes a little bit deeper, so it could be an advantage for you, or it could be a disadvantage for your family. They take into consideration home value and mortgage information, private school tuition, that could be a good thing, business owner information, medical and dental expenses, non-custodial parent information, outstanding debts, projected financial information for the coming year, and explanation of special circumstances. So they're getting a whole bunch more information about what your financial situation is, not just how much you spent in taxes last year. So again, sometimes the CSS profile gives parents a big boost to their profile, and other times they're like, wait, you're valuing my home? I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Stuff like that. Or my business, like you're getting my business information involved in this financial situation. So if you want to find out more information about how they calculate it, again, you can go to the College Board website, link in the description, and you can find out more about the CSS profile. So this is a screenshot from USC. I used them before, and one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about USC is because they have a ton of scholarships, and they have very specific scholarships too. For example, they have specific scholarship deadlines. So there are some schools out there that will have a deadline that's different than their normal college deadline just for scholarships. So for example, USC's deadline is not December 1st. But if you want to apply for scholarships, there's a special deadline. So pay attention to that. Most scholarships at schools, you're automatically admitted for. Basically, the admissions department and financial aid department, they want to entice the best students to come to their schools, so they'll, automatically put them in the running for a presidential scholarship or something like that. USC does the same thing. You're automatically enrolled if you are in this December 1st deadline for some scholarships, but there are always others. There are other scholarships that you have to apply special for. And so going to the school's individual website will give you more insights into what scholarships you can apply to, because some of them will be automatic, great, and other ones you'll have to apply to specifically. This is frustrating for some students because they're like, I'm applying for a scholarship to a school and I don't even know if I'm into that school yet. I know. The reason why I also point out USC is because they have over 3 pages of scholarships in their download document where there's all these scholarships and all these different dates and stuff like that. That's just one example from one school. So you could imagine how it'd be really difficult for anyone to be able to track and know all this stuff. So as you know your list and as you kind of know what schools you're interested in, you should seek out these scholarships and find out if any of them fit you really well. Sometimes you shouldn't be surprised also if you go onto the scholarship section of your school's website and it says you're automatically enrolled for all scholarships. Okay, that's a normal thing. All right, let's talk about private sources for a second. I already mentioned those private loans. Okay, so that's definitely part of the private sources of income, all of those private loans that you can get. But private sources are also really willing to give away scholarships, free money. Almost every single business and organization in the United States have some sort of scholarship. There's tax benefits for the company. It makes them look good. We want an educated, group of people. Like, scholarships are good, so companies have them. The problem is that there's so many to keep track of. I can't just suggest a scholarship because there's so many. Okay, so we rely on websites to guide us there. At Chaminade office, we love Going Merry. The reason why we like it is because it's so easy for students to follow. Again, joining for free is good. There are people out there that charge fees to find you scholarships. So they're like, oh, in the end, we'll save you money, but pay us up front. And that's very sketchy. But Going Merry is free and trustworthy. So what you do is you join for free, you put in all your information, and then they'll give you this sort of printout thing. And they'll list a bunch of scholarships that you qualify for. They'll give you the amounts. They'll tell you how many days it is to apply to it. They'll tell you the average time it takes to complete the application. And a lot of times it's already on Going Merry, and Going Merry can auto-populate part of the application. So it'll take all of your address and stuff like that and just plug it in already. So this is a really, really good resource. One thing that you should know is that a lot of these resources the way that they make money is prioritizing certain scholarships. So don't be surprised if, a college that you might not be interested in pops up as giving you a big scholarship, because that's kind of like advertising. It's not a fake scholarship. You could probably get that money, but right here it says MSU Texas merit-based scholarship is right there on your Going Merry. So MSU Texas is willing to have that information there and give away that scholarship to attract you as a student. You just have to be able to be really critical and decide, whether that's a good scholarship for you to apply to and if that causes you to apply to that school. Okay. Other sources, FastWeb. They've been around for a really long time. Free scholarship searches, great. If you like this better than Going Merry, perfect. You should also check on the counseling page. We have scholarships on Naviance. We have scholarships that we post on Blackboard. We send out emails about scholarships. So there are special scholarships that schools give to Chaminade for us to nominate our students. So making sure that your list is updated is really important, because let's say University of Virginia gives us a scholarship and says, hey, nominate one of your students who's applying to our school. If you don't have University of Virginia in your Naviance list, then when we query it, we won't know to think of you when we're nominating students. Okay, just a little heads up. We are getting scholarships as Chaminade, and we're looking out for you to try to make sure that, we're awarding all of the best students and thinking of all of you. Okay, the last form of money is you. I know you don't want to hear that, but colleges expect you to pay money. The government expects you to pay money, and that's built in with their expected family contribution. And one thing that's important is that if you're a student watching this, you are responsible for this money. I know that your parents are, they're technically responsible too, and they're a part of this equation, but this is your financial future. And a lot of students avoid thinking about this because the numbers are big and they're actually really hard to grasp. Some of you might have a better idea of how much money is worth, but I'm an adult and I don't know if I can properly decide whether I should commit to going back to college for $70,000 or something like that. It's crazy. It's a difficult decision. So don't be afraid to talk about it. Okay? Have open conversations with your parents because you're in this together. Have conversations with people you trust about money. If you trust me, you can come talk to me about this as well. I'm not an expert or an accountant in any way, but I can help walk you through some of this. But remember, this is a serious financial commitment. All right, let's talk about some financial myths and misconceptions. The first one is that working while in college will hurt my grades. I think that is a total myth. I love working from college. I ranted about it for a while. You go back and watch that. But I think that it's wonderful, and I don't think it'll hurt your grades. Honestly, you need to balance stuff. And one of the most important things is that if you're working on campus, they have rules that prevent you from working too much. So you're going to have plenty of time to handle your grades and work a little bit too. My family won't qualify for aid, so I don't need to fill out the FAFSA. Your family might not qualify for aid. Okay. But just because you're not getting that $6,000 Pell Grant doesn't mean that you can't get unsubsidized loans at a really good rate. It doesn't mean that you can't get scholarships. It doesn't mean that you can't get institutional aid. Okay. Because the colleges and the financial aid department at colleges use the FAFSA. And if you don't have the FAFSA, they might want to award you a scholarship and they can't. Okay, so fill out the FAFSA even if you're not getting money from the federal government and state government, because institutions and scholarships and other people might want to give you money. Okay. There's not as much financial aid as there used to be. Well, this is something that I see on the internet, and it's just not true. There's more financial aid than there used to be before. There is more money out there. And it's not even as competitive. Okay. Another thing that goes along with this is that there's millions of dollars of unclaimed scholarships every year. That's a bit of an overinflation as well. So why are these ideas floating around there? Well, someone wants to scare you or motivate you into using their services. When you think that there's not as much financial aid as there used to be, you might be more inclined to use their search service or pay someone to apply to these things for you. Okay. Remember, there's tons of aid out there. You can find it, use some of the tools that I suggested, and be wary of people trying to sell you something or scare you into making decisions. You can negotiate loans if you haggle with the financial aid office. No, you can't. Now, that's not to be said that you can't explain extenuating circumstances to them. Okay? I've had dozens and dozens of parents go back to the financial aid office and just say, I want to go to your school, but I can't. I just can't afford it. there's this gap in financial need, like I can't afford it. And then a lot of times the financial aid officers will be like, we'll take another look at it. We'll see what we can do. You know, there's nothing wrong with asking, for making that connection. There are so many people that go and visit college campuses, maybe not right now, but in general, and no one visits the financial aid office. Those people should be your best friends. They're amazing. Okay. Just connect with them, talk with them, tell them the truth about your financial situation, and give them the opportunity to work with you. Okay. But if you're trying to play hardball with your admission, that won't work, because the admissions department and the financial aid department are completely separate. And the admissions officer, might really want you for some reason, but the financial aid office is just following the rules that are given them. They're separate for a reason. Okay. You have lower admissions chances if you need financial aid. False. Okay. Some people get afraid of asking for financial aid or putting that down on their application, because usually there's a checkbox that says, I will be applying for financial aid. There are a ton of schools out there that are completely need blind, which means that they won't even look to see if you are applying for financial aid when considering you. And in general, most schools won't really consider it at all. Okay. And remember, the admissions office is very different than the financial aid office. There are a few situations where they will actually look at financial aid. One of them is international students. Okay. They're not really getting financial aid anyways, and they won't qualify for many of the programs that are out there. And so they'll kind of make sure that they're paying full rate. Students taken off the wait list. I know it seems a little bit weird, but as they're trying to fill up their class, they might also be trying to fill up their budget. And so a lot of schools coincidentally leave out that they're need blind when it comes to their wait list. And sometimes having to do with transfer students. Okay. But again, all of these colleges will be very upfront about this information. And for the most part, if you need money, write down that you need it, and it will not affect your admissions. All right. This has been a healthy sized video talking about a subject that is truly riveting, and I thank you so much for watching it. I hope you learned a little bit about financial aid and how it works, and basically the basics, and hopefully you can use this video to guide you to your next steps. I'll have links in the description from the FAFSA and CSS profile and some of the resources that I pulled up, all that good stuff. If you have any questions, we'll be answering some of them in the comments down below. But remember, your counselor is going to be a huge resource to you, so make sure to reach out to them. I'm Daniel Johnson from the Chaminade Counseling Office. Thank you again for watching.